As you can see, there are many different kinds of graphs. The question is, how do you know how to describe them? Well, the first thing to do is to decide if your graph shows a trend. Well, how do you know if your graph shows a trend? Well, it should show time moving forward, because a trend is a change over time. And time could be shown in years, for example, from 1900 to 2000, or in days, for example, from day 1 to day 10, or even in minutes or hours. However time is measured, if your graph shows time moving forward, it shows a trend. Look at these simple line graphs. The first one shows the pollution level from 1950 to 2000. So is time moving forward? Well, yes it is. From 1950 to 2000, that means that time is moving forward. So we can say this is an upward trend, as you can see that the line is going up over the period. Look at the second line graph. This one shows the consumption of fast food. Does this one also show a trend? Let's see. Is time moving forward? Well, yes it is. From day 1 to day 6, we can say that time is moving forward. So what kind of trend is it? Well, as you can see, the line is going downwards, so we can say this is a downward trend. Look at the third diagram. This one is a bar chart. Does this one also show a trend? Can you see time anywhere? No, we can't. So we cannot say this shows a trend. Well, what does it show then? It shows the population in Germany and in the Philippines. And from the information we can see that the population in the Philippines is higher than the population in Germany. So let's look at these graphs together and decide if they show a trend or not. Look at A. This one shows CO2 emissions from 1960 to 2010. So can we say time is moving forward? Yes. So we can say this shows an upward trend. Look at B. This one looks at the sales of desktop computers in 2015. Does it show time moving forward? Is there a change over time? No, there isn't. So this one does not show a trend. What about C? This one is looking at major earthquakes, and there are some countries there and years, but is time moving steadily forward? No, it's not. So we cannot say this is a trend. Look at D. This one shows the investment in the environment from 2005 to 2020. Is this one a trend? Yes, it is. Look at E, fatality of work-related accidents from 1985 to 2010. Is time moving forward? Yes, it is. So we can say this shows a trend. And for most of the period, it's a downward trend. Look at graph F, the bar chart. Does this one show a change over time? No, it doesn't. So we cannot say this one is a trend. Now we're going to look at the specific vocabulary for describing trends, or in other words, for describing change over time. Look at the first line graph. It shows an upward trend in the sales of cars from 1950 to 2000. We can use a variety of nouns and verbs to describe this movement. And it's a good idea to change your vocabulary and grammatical structures, as the examiner is also grading your level of English as well as how you answer the question. The first sentence here says sales of cars increased from 1950 to 2000, or sales of cars went up from 1950 to 2000, or sales of cars rose from 1950 to 2000. So you see, there are 3 different verbs we can use to show this upward movement. But we can also use a noun. There was an increase in the sales of cars from 1950 to 2000, or there was a rise in the sales of cars from 1950 to 2000. The second line graph shows a downward trend in the pollution level from 1950 to 2000. We can use a verb to describe this movement. The pollution level fell or decreased from 1950 to 2000, or we can use a noun. There was a decrease or there was a fall in pollution levels from 1950 to 2000. Sometimes the trend is stable, as in this line graph. It shows that the birth rate remained stable or constant from 1975 to 2000. So we can say the birth rate remained stable from 1975 to 2000, or the birth rate remained constant from 1975 to 2000. We could also use a noun. There was a stability in the birth rate from 1975 to 2000. Look at the second line graph. This one shows a lot of movement. We use the word fluctuation to describe this movement. The enrollments in physics fluctuated from 1975 to 2000, or there was a fluctuation in enrollments in physics from 1975 to 2000. Look at these line graphs here. The first one shows this highest point in sales in 1985. So we can say there was a peak in sales in 1985, or sales reached a peak in 1985. The opposite of the peak is a dip. We can say there was a dip in the crime rate in 1985, or the rate of crime dipped in 1985. This is a summary of all the vocabulary we discussed for describing trends. Note here there are verbs to describe a very sharp rise and a very sharp fall as well. So if your rise is very sharp, you can say sales boomed, or sales rocketed, or sales soared. If they fell very sharply, we could say sales plunged or plummeted. So here is a list of all the verbs we talked about, and this is a list of all the nouns. So it's a good idea to learn this vocabulary, because remember, you only have 20 minutes in task 1 to analyze the graph and write your response in a well-structured manner. So if you know the vocabulary you need, you can immediately start writing. We learned all the vocabulary you need to describe change or a trend, but it's not enough to be able to describe the trend only. You need to be able to describe the speed of change as well. In other words, how slow or how fast did the change happen? Here's a list of adverbs and adjectives to show the speed of change. Look at the first one. When the change is steep, we use adverbs like dramatically or steeply. For example, we can say the level of pollution rose or fell dramatically or steeply or sharply. Any of these adverbs here. Remember, we said we can also use a noun to describe the movement. We can say there was a dramatic rise in the level of pollution, or there was a sharp fall in the level of pollution. Look at these ones here in the second line. Important changes. Now, I like these words. I call them safe words because if you're not sure if the change is sharp or minimal, you use these ones in the middle, which show that the change is important, not dramatic, not minimal, it's somewhere in the middle. So we can say, for example, house prices rose significantly, or house prices fell substantially, or markedly, or there was a significant rise in house prices, or there was a substantial fall in house prices. For small changes, we use these adverbs and adjectives in the last columns. For example, we can say the birth rate rose slightly, or gradually, or minimally, or even steadily. If we're using a noun, we would say there was a slight rise in birth rates, or there was a gradual fall in the birth rate. We also talked about fluctuations before. Fluctuations can also have a change in speed. Look at these wild fluctuations. We can describe them by saying sales fluctuated erratically, or sales fluctuated wildly. We can also say sales fluctuated within a wide margin, like these ones here. If we imagine that there's a margin around the fluctuations, we can say sales fluctuated within a wide margin, or there was a fluctuation within a wide margin. These are significant fluctuations, and down here are mild fluctuations. So we can say there was a mild fluctuation, or sales fluctuated mildly, or there was a fluctuation within a narrow margin of 10 and 15 units. Depends what the margin is. So let's practice this vocabulary in the sentences we learned so far. We must match the sentence on the left with the diagram on the right. Let's do this together. Look at the example. Sales of audio cassettes fell steadily. That would go with G. This is a steady fall. Look at number 2. iPod sales rose gradually. Which one shows a gradual rise? That would be B, wouldn't it? Gradual rise. Number 3. Plasma TV sales fluctuated wildly, but the trend was upward. This one, A, shows a fluctuation, but the trend is downward. Moving down, we come to D. This is a fluctuation and the trend goes upward. So we can say the answer is D. Look at number 5. Total digital camera sales dropped slightly. Which one would that be? C would match that, wouldn't it? C. Look at number 6. Sales of audio cassettes fell and then leveled off. So we're looking for a fall and then a stability. That would be H. Fall and then stability. Look at number 7. The sales of MP3 players rose gradually and then climbed sharply. So we're looking for a gradual fall and then a steep fall. So the answer is F. Gradual fall and then steep fall. Look at number 8. Purchases of video cassette recorders declined dramatically. So which one shows a dramatic fall? That would be E, wouldn't it? Look at number 9. Sales of games consoles decreased and then leveled off. Decreased and then leveled off. So that would be H. And number 10. CD sales dropped suddenly. Again, that would be E. This exercise practices different sentence structures. Remember we mentioned earlier that it's better to show the examiner that you know how to use an adjective and a noun, and you also now know how to use a verb with an adverb. Let's do this exercise together. There was a steady growth in car sales. So we have here adjective and noun. To transform it, we can say car sales grew steadily. So grew would be the verb from the noun growth, and steadily would be an adverb. Car sales grew steadily. Look at number 2. This one is the other way round. The birth rate increased significantly. Beginning with there was a significant increase in the birth rate. So number 2 would be there was a significant increase in the birth rate. Look at number 3. There was enormous drop in the crime rate. So we need a verb and an adverb now. The crime rate dropped enormously. The crime rate dropped enormously. Look at number 4. The cost of education rose dramatically. There was a dramatic rise in the cost of education. Look at number 5. There was a significant decrease in the price of oil. The price of oil decreased significantly. Number 6. The number of working mothers remained stable. There was a stability in the number of working mothers. There was a wild fluctuation in the number of tourists. The number of tourists fluctuated wildly. And the last one, the amount of SO2 in the atmosphere went up minimally. There was a minimal rise in the amount of SO2 in the atmosphere. So you see how we can transform our sentences and show our range of grammatical structures. This is another example which you can do in your own time. Let's look at the examples. The consumption of chocolate fell steadily. So we have a verb plus an adverb. To transform this, we can say there was a steady fall in the consumption of chocolate. So we have an adjective with a noun. Look at the second example. There has been a dramatic rise in the production of films. The production of films has risen dramatically. So do these in your own time and check the answers in the ebook. Let's practice making some sentences using a subject from here, a verb, choose one of these verbs from this column, an adverb from this column, and a time period from the last column. For example, the population fell dramatically from 1990 to 2000. So we have a subject, a verb, an adverb, and a time. Let's do another one. The amount of SO2 in the atmosphere declined significantly between 1990 and 2000. And another one. The number of working mothers with children under 5 years old went up steadily last year. So you can see these are some very common structures with a subject, a verb, an adverb, and a time period. This is another exercise to practice describing trends. Here again you must match the sentence from A to L with the graph from 1 to 8, and you can use the same graph more than once. Let's begin this exercise together. Sales rocketed over the period. Which one of these line graphs shows sales rocketing? Well, it would have to be 8, wouldn't it? Look at this really sharp rise. So we can say A goes with 8. Sales rocketed over the period. Look at B. The purchase of furniture was rather erratic, hitting a peak in the middle of the period. So we're looking for an erratic fluctuation with a peak in the middle. Okay, this is a fluctuation, but that's not really a peak in the middle, is it? So we carry on and we come to 5, which shows a wild fluctuation and the highest point or the peak in the middle. So B is 5. So practice doing these to practice the vocabulary we learned and sentence structures. The answers are here on the left. Look at this line graph. It shows how many people visited 2 music sites on the web. So let's look at all the information on this line graph. Here are the 2 music sites. Music Choice, from the key, we know that the Music Choice is the bottom line and Pop Parade is the upper line up here. So if we're going to compare how many people visited Pop Parade and how many people visited Music Choice, we can say that, generally speaking, Pop Parade was more popular than Music Choice over the 15-day period, couldn't we? So that would probably be our elephant sentence, that more people visited Pop Parade over most of the period, because we can see here from day 12 to 13, Music Choice overtook Pop Parade, didn't it? Now for this exercise, we're only looking at Music Choice, this one here. Okay. You have to read the sentence, look at the graph, Music Choice in other words, and then choose the word from this box down the bottom that goes in the space. So let's look at number 1, or A. The number of hits to Music Choice, something to 60,000 on day 3. Well, let's look at day 3. It's this one here, isn't it? From day 2 to day 3. So we need a verb from this box to describe what happened from day 2 to day 3. Let's have a look. Fluctuated, plunged, a new peak, steep fall, soared. That would describe it, wouldn't it? The number of hits to Music Choice soared to 60,000 on day 3 because it shows a sharp rise. We can also say rocketed because that is also a verb which means rose sharply. So the number of hits to Music Choice soared or rocketed to 60,000 on day 3. Let's look at B. On the 4th day, the number of hits to the Music Choice site, something by 66 to 20,000. So let's have a look at the 4th day. It's from here, isn't it? From day 3 to day 4. So it looks like it fell sharply, didn't it? So let's have a look in the box to see what we're going to use. On the 4th day, the number of visitors to the Music Choice site, we can't say halved by 66%. We can't say a gradual rise because we need a verb. None of these fit. None of these. We're going to choose fell back because it fell, and we can't say fell sharply either because it says by 66%. So we choose fell back by 66% to 20,000. Let's do one more. There was something in hits to the Music Choice site on the 3rd day. Remember, the 3rd day was this sharp rise here. So we're going to choose there was. It wasn't a gradual rise, was it? It was more like a sharp rise because it rose in one day from 20,000 visits to 60,000 visits. So finish these at home so you can practice vocabulary and different sentence structure. There are the examples at the left.